one of the reasons it is such a chaotic time in the industry, not just at Meta, but across the kind of every company, and there's a tremendous amount of unease, is like, this is the least clear vision we've had of like even the relatively near future in a long time. I think 2 years ago, we started to get a sense of, 3 years ago, we were excited. 2 years ago, we started to get a sense like, whoa, this is bigger than we thought. I think last year, it got to a point of seriousness that it became, an almost existential conversation for a lot of us.
Hello, I'm Nicholas Thompson, and this is The Most Interesting Thing in AI, a podcast produced by Rethink, the Atlantic's creative marketing studio. If you're above a certain age, you might remember a very different version of Facebook. It was sort of a directory with your friends. You couldn't do much. You would just comment and like, and there's a thing called poke. But in 2006, Facebook did something controversial. They added newsfeed. Suddenly, everyone's Facebook interactions were blasted out to the whole network. Users said it violated their privacy. It may have been the company's first privacy scandal. Facebook briefly apologized and then just pressed forward. You know what? Became one of the most important, successful products that Facebook ever made. Man behind it was a guy named Andrew Bosworth, known as Boz. He's been a very early Facebook employee, and he has been there ever since. Often, he's in the middle of the storm, pushing things forward that users are upset about, but that end up being really core to the company's business. Part of the decision to rename Facebook Meta was in charge of their reality labs, their VR glasses, their AR glasses, their current glasses that some people love. Some people say are introducing mass spyware. He's partly in charge of their AI operations, which of course is a massive, massive bet for the company. Also a little controversy there, where Facebook said it was going to record the keystrokes of their employees in order to make their AI better. They then rolled that back amid employee outrage, but who knows what's going to come next. So here's my conversation with Andrew Bosworth. Andrew Bosworth, welcome to The Most Interesting Thing in AI.
Thanks for having me.
You're here for the glasses. Explain where we are in the development of the glasses, because in order to have them become a mass product and to displace the phone, you need a big developer ecosystem. But to get a big developer ecosystem, you need mass adoption of the glasses. To get mass adoption of the glasses, you need a big developer ecosystem. Where are you in this flywheel?
Yeah, we're making great progress, I tell you, because the glasses, turns out, don't need a developer ecosystem to be great. And we knew that was going to be the case when we launched them. That these have to be great on their own terms for people to want to use them. And actually, what's funny is like even without the AI features, which I think are such an exciting part of them, they're great glasses. People are using them all the time. They're using them for the audio. They're using them for the video and the hands-free recording. Very, very popular with parents with young children, so they can capture that moment, share it, but not be separate from it from the phone. Very popular with athletes who are going on long runs or going on rides and want to be able to do hands-free capture or have an audio going at the same time. So the glasses are selling very well on the merits. We didn't even conceive of AI as it exists today when we built the glasses that we have. Now that we have AI, they're even better. So they're even more capable of helping people. And then with the display glasses, we just launched a vibe coding platform for the displays, and we're seeing tremendous enthusiasm from developers. And because it's not about taking every app in the world and bringing it to the glasses, it's about what is the thing that you need for your glasses specifically, and you can go get that. I do think where we're headed over time is away from this concept of apps or even static development. I think we're headed towards very dynamic AI-generated applications where you just ask your AI on your glasses or wherever for what you need, and it generates it on the fly and delivers it to you. All the service providers get paid for the value they're creating. That's all negotiated on your behalf behind the scenes, but you get what you need when you need it.
My favorite use case for the glasses is I put them on and I just talk to them, like talk to AI. Like I'm making breakfast and I need to learn about something today. I was, asking this morning while I was making my kids breakfast, I was asking it about the components in Muse Spark, just so I would be a little more up to speed on that. The killer app for me, and I think for the world, would be if you could adjust vision with them, right? And if you could enter your prescription or if you could turn a knob, and when will that be possible?
Yeah, so those are called liquid lenses. They exist in a lot of different formats. So right now, I say we want to clear, the glasses can correct your vision.
Right now you can just get prescription lenses.
They have prescription lenses. Right now they have prescription lenses. Yeah,
that's right. These, right, and I'll take these lenses out, put them in here, and then I can see you perfectly, right?
Yeah.
But
So they certainly do prescription lenses. That's right.
But now I can't see you.
Yeah. So I want to be clear. Like, the glasses do handle prescription lenses. You're asking, like, when can you have auto-tuned liquid lenses?
Or software that adjusts it. Like, whatever the solution is, because I feel like this is the killer app for these things.
Software adjustment's really, really hard. There's not a technology path for that. But the technology path that probably does exist is, you can have lenses that are two membranes that deform under pressure, under tension, that have some kind of a liquid inside, and that's quite controllable on either one or two axes. That is a possibility. I think that technology exists. The main reason we don't do it is that those are a little more fragile, and the robustness of getting prescription lenses and getting those distributed to people has gotten quite a lot better over time.
The second app that is most controversial and harder is face recognition, right? And it'll obviously be like supremely useful, but obviously it weirds people out.
Yeah. So
controversial, where are you on that?
We just donated 180,000 pairs of Ray-Ban Metas to every blind veteran in America. Why'd we do that? The glasses are incredibly popular with the blind community.
You had a blind designer on them early, right? Wasn't one of the product leads was blind? Yeah.
Yeah, and actually I asked her, I was like, why is it important to blind people to have these glasses? Why are they helping blind people so much? And she's like, you know what? She's like, people get blindness wrong. She's like, I can get to the restaurant. I've got Google Maps. I've got hearables. I've got a cane. I've got a dog. I can get to the restaurant. She's like, you know what I can't do? Can't find the door. She's like, Google Maps told me I'm at the restaurant. Cool. Where's the door? I can't read the menu. So they lose independence. So they call services like Be My Eyes, Mike Buckley, CEO, former Meta employee, actually. And they talk to somebody who's looking at the camera and tells them, okay, the door is to your left. Okay, there it is. You got it. Now they can still do that with a partnership that we have with the glasses, but they can also just ask the AI, and the AI can answer it for them. So they're gaining independence. If you ask the blind community what the number one request that we get from them is, it's who's in the room with me? Tell me who's here. They're not asking for a global central database of faces. They're like, people I know. Like, what people that I know are here? It's funny, I was at Oscar Mike last week. They came to campus. This is a veterans group that deals with people who have traumatic brain injuries. So they often struggle with memory. They struggle with cognition. And this came up, and this is, again, a top ask for them. Hey, like, I just want to know who I'm talking to, and like, how do I know them, and what's my history with this person? They're not asking for a central database of people. They're asking for, like, this is someone I know.
Wait, so the idea, the program that has been written about is called NameTag. The idea of that is not, here's a person you haven't seen before, here's who they are, here's their LinkedIn. It's that this is a person you've met or who's in your Facebook graph.
Encrypted locally to your device, somebody that you met in person with your glasses on, who introduced themselves, or you said, okay, this is David, remember this person. Only available to you when you're wearing your glasses. This is a person you've met before, here's their name, they're right in front of you. That's what I'm talking. That's what we call a name tags feature.
Right.
And it's, so I think people get confused because they hear face recognition and they think, oh, there's a central face database that everyone's being scanned constantly into. It's not that. But you're right. It's still controversial. I think it's one of those things that you can't even do in some states based on the state laws. We've got BIPA in Illinois and QB in Texas and these things. So it's a thing that I think would be a great feature. By the way, and I've told the story through the blind low vision community, or told the story through Oscar Mike. You'd use it. I'd use it. Like, I go to parties where I definitely have met somebody before. You're a journalist. You must meet people constantly, and constantly in your head be like, I know this person, name, face, what was the last time we talked, what's the context here? We call it the cocktail party problem. It's a very universally human problem. Nearly every human I talk to, no matter what their status of their vision or their memory is, understands that this is a problem that would help them feel more comfortable in social situations if they had it. But it has to be done in a way that people feel comfortable.
Right. And it's definitely the thing that creeps, no question. Everybody can see the utility. Like, and if you've been to a high school reunion, my Lord, you could use the utility, but also quite clearly creeps people out. The advantage, or one of the advantages that you have as Meta, is that everybody's using it for consumer use cases. You're able to feed that back in. Explain how you're training on your own employees. This has obviously been controversial recently with the model capability initiative. What are you trying to learn from your employees? As has been reported in the press, you're sort of tracking what they type in, learning from their intelligence. I believe it was Zuckerberg said, our employees are more intelligent than the average person. We want to see how they use machines so that we can make our AI better. Explain that.
Yeah, although that program is now paused. So
the whole program is paused
just for now
because of the data issues.
Well, we're trying to make sure we have a full accounting for the program. Let me explain the theory of it. The theory is actually very straightforward. You've got a bunch of employees that are already doing this work every day, and for no incremental effort on their part, you can potentially improve your models.
Yep.
And that benefits not only your employees when they go back and try to do their jobs, but also consumers, people who want to use AI. Now, the scope of this research, and it really was research, it's worth noting, this is research that we didn't expect to yield for like 18 months, like at the earliest. It would be the earliest that we would actually have a look at what this would look like inside of a model. It needs very long running data. It was literally things as simple as how to use a computer, a thing that AIs are surprisingly bad at for being themselves computers. Like literally how do you navigate UIs? Like what do you click next? And a lot of our workflows are in these like digital silos. They're going to be there for a long time. Like a year and a half from now, it's still going to be the case that these, that the flows that we're going through every day as we go about our work. So the most basic premise was like, hey, can we teach AI to use computers? It's a data set that doesn't really exist at scale. And you can do acute versions of this. You can certainly hire people through Scale AI or other places to like, hey, give me like a quick walkthrough. But we wanted to see, hey, over the course of months, how do people like, make progress on work literally using a computer? And so that was the premise of this research.
What were you recording and tracking of them?
Yeah, it was like literally like your mouse movements, like what are you clicking? Like where are you, what window are you activating?
Right.
And trying to create enough of a data stream here.
And was it all employees? Like were you tracking yourself?
In the US, though there was a few employees excluded. So a good example is if you look at someone like me, where in a position that I'm in, we're under any number of legal holds.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, any information that's created on my behalf is automatically stored and preserved by law. That makes me like a relatively poor target for this work. So there's a bunch of jobs, people who regularly worked on sensitive data. That was like, hey, you're excluded. So we excluded a bunch of teams, we excluded individuals. There's a whole process by which people can opt out of this stuff.
No, it would make for an amazing data set. How do executives at companies dealing with like legal holds handle computers? That's a proprietary data set that you can imagine having value.
Yeah, taking a step back, I think we're in a very interesting place where you saw the OpenAI trial with, Greg Brockman's writing a note to himself as a diary, and that's being exposed. And I think there is at least one legal precedent that shows, hey, like asking questions to an LLM is not, you can't have that be protected, even if you're asking a legal question.
Right.
I do think there's like an interesting question that we need to raise at some point relatively soon on privilege and like what should be privileged and not privileged in a world where like you can credibly get a consumer, somebody who couldn't even afford a lawyer necessarily, could get credible legal advice. Set aside, nobody cares about corporations. They've got enough money to hire all the lawyers. Somebody who like can't afford a lawyer but could actually get expert legal advice from an AI, given that the premise I think of our system is that like people should have legal representation. Like, what does it look like? So I think there's an interesting question, but I'll leave that for the courts.
We'll leave that for the courts.
Legislators.
All right, let's go back. So you and other people who work on sensitive information are excluded from this program, but the majority of Meta employees are
of American
Meta employees.
Yeah.
Right. Originally, like Europe would never let you do this, right?
We didn't even ask.
Right. Okay. So majority of them are included. You're kind of keeping track of mouse movements. What did you learn? How valuable was it? And why did you stop?
Yeah, so we took a look at the data a couple of weeks in, and there was a lot more duplication than we expected. It's like, hey, and one thing that's interesting about this is when you think about high volumes of data, you're usually talking about pre-training. And it's like when you're talking about exquisite data where you've got a really detailed expert explanation of something, that's a lot of times that's mid-training or post-training. So these are meant to be long running, but you need variance. Variance is far more important than like a high volume of the same thing that gets collapsed into one example, basically.
Yeah.
And so one of the first things we saw was like, actually there was a lot less variance than we expected. So that was why, like, I think a couple weeks after we initially launched it, we added like, okay, expanded opt-outs for people who didn't want to do it, a pause, like infinite pause, like just whenever you don't want to have it, just press pause. You can do it as many times as you want. So we added a bunch of things. We're like, okay, there's a lot of duplication here. So we probably overshot needing as much as we got. And then we like went through that process of like, okay, having looked at that and reduced the variance, now we've added these tools. And then this last week, we had an issue where the data that we were storing was quite secure, relatively small number of people had access. One of the researchers who was working downstream of that data, and there was no breach here, but like had put it in a place it wasn't supposed to go. So we're kind of locking the whole thing down until we can like
The data meaning
the employee. There's like
these employees use these keystrokes and move their hands in these ways?
not the raw data. It was a transform on top of it.
Yeah.
But it still landed someplace it shouldn't have landed internally. Right. Internal only. No reason to believe foul play. We're looking at every single access, doing those kinds of things. And so we've just paused the entire program until we can get to the bottom of this. While we're doing that, we're actually going to run kind of an early simulation of like, hey, what would it look like to do a train just with this like small data set that we have to understand like the long-term value of the data? Because this was a research project. This wasn't like, hey, this is guaranteed to be the game changer.
Why did you do it on your own employees as opposed to hiring 10,000 TaskRabbits?
Yeah, the main thing is what we wanted were these long traces. You want like months long, everyday work. And I think like it's very important that the data actually look like what real work looks like over a long period of time in a professional kind of environment. And so I think it's like a pretty appealing data set, a unique data set. I think one of the long-term concepts that you have to have with AI is like data is the font of all value. All the tremendous wizardry involved in transforming it into these models is almost magic.
Right.
But if you don't have the data set up front, the chance that it's going to be in the distribution of the model in the back end is low.
Yeah.
And so I think one of these I expect to happen in AI as we continue to fight along these curves, these scaling laws, is an increased demand for these like data sets, these long tail data sets. We think of all the corpus of human media on the internet as being surely this is all of human knowledge, but it's not even close. I don't think it even scratches the surface. I think all the time, like you've got somebody who's working on Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. There's a tremendous amount of just judgment that goes into each of those things. You can read the statutes and get it wrong because you're not plugged into how people in the industry are accounting for things and what the regulators are kind of thinking and what the real concerns are. And so like the long tail is very long.
So what's the dream data set that you would like to have access to that you don't have access to?
Well, I think all data sets that represent real human value creation are interesting. And these are some that are like probably impossible to get. Like, what's the creative process somebody goes through when they're crafting a story that's like an amazing story? It's just like there's not even that many amazing stories out there, let alone like the people to monitor while they're doing it. And if you ask those people what their process was, there's a good chance they don't even know what their process was. You know, like I was in the shower, like I had this idea, like I followed it. So AI is a data hungry vehicle, and the more unique data you can feed it, the better it's able to help you on the other side.
Right.
The more useful of a tool it is.
One of the reasons why your program was uncomfortable to employees was they were like, hold on a second. Is this being used to replace me? Right. Is this going to make it easier to wipe me out? And like, where do you think the line should be drawn around the data that we create that really is just ours and should go into AI?
Yeah, I'm like personally somebody, I think this is a tool that's mostly about maximizing each individual person. And so when I think about what AI does for me today, it's like doing tasks that I otherwise would have done, am capable of doing, but I just like don't think are the best use of my time.
Right.
I think every time we find one of these productivity improvements going back quite a long ways in human history, we worry that it's like, oh no, the thing that it means to be human is going away. And like every time, like, no, it's not. Like it turns out that wasn't what it meant to be human. Like it wasn't the case that we needed to like stitch the fabric manually for it to be like a valuable procession to design garments for humans. Like there's like we find meaning in that work, and that's good for us. But we also like that is not the exclusive domain of human meaning. It turns out we apply the meaning to whatever we put our energy into. And so like I think of AI as like individuals unbounded. Mm-hmm. So when I'm working with somebody, and one of the jobs that I have now at the company is what we call the Agent Transformation Accelerator. It's like, how do we get agents that work on behalf of employees to help them with their work? And it's like, that is 100% the framing. The framing is like, hey, right now, every individual goes about their day, their work contains all these tasks. Yeah. If you could take half those tasks, and I just gave you a tool, and you're like, this task is now done correctly for me. Mm-hmm. What are you doing with the remaining time? Not nothing. Like you're doing something of value. Right. Like you're doing probably something of greater and more unique value that only you are capable of doing. For us, at least, I see ourselves as we're building the tools that are going to help people do their work, but do whatever, not just their work, do whatever they want to do. The vision that we have, not just for employees but broadly, this personal superintelligence vision is a vision. It's very human centric. It's very much like, hey, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, what do you believe that you're capable of? And today, you're not able to do it because you have like 10 things that take a bunch of your time that literally anybody could do, but no one's going to do it for you. But an AI could potentially help.
All right, so AI does that, and suddenly half my day, ideally the mundane half of my day is taken care of, and then I suddenly have a bunch more hours free, and ideally I use them doing higher value tasks. I don't just use them scrolling or whatever. Happens to the whole world. How does that change the way your organization is structured? Like, what is do you have more engineers? Do you have fewer engineers? Do you pay them more? Do you pay them less? What about the relationship between engineers and product?
Yeah, so it's a great point. I'm gonna like 3 spin-offs of this thing to answer your question. The first one is, I'm already having this experience. So writing software, it's something I love doing. I've done it for my whole career. And today, things that used to take me a lot of time take almost no time.
Yeah.
And it's pretty wild. I'm finding though that I'm producing software more quickly as a consequence, but not as much more quickly as I thought I would. And it turns out a lot of the work I was doing while I was writing the code was like also thinking about what am I building and like taking shape. And so what I end up with if I'm not careful is I will very quickly end up with a well-executed bad product. Okay, a really completely built prototype of a thing that's not good. I didn't really realize how much I was jumping into coding with a half an idea of my head, and then while the coding was happening, sharpening the idea over time. So
yeah, it's the same with writing.
It's like, so it's like, oh shoot, like, this is a full English text, like it reads, but it's not good. The idea was underdeveloped, and as a consequence, the corpus is underdeveloped.
Yeah.
And so I think we underestimate the degree to which we think that, it took me 10 hours to code this. If you take the 10 hours away, you don't have the same project at the end in 0 hours. Because it turns out while you were coding, you were also thinking about what you were building and like making it better and over time.
Right. So the product is both better. At the end of the 10 hours, if you do it and you actually code it, the product is better and you are smarter.
That's
you
right.
spent those 10 hours thinking about it. If you use AI, you're no smarter and the product's not good.
And now you're like in a weird like test. So what I'm doing is like I'm still getting the product faster. I'm spending way more time up front, being like, okay, let me just imagine that I have this, or I'm building a lot of prototypes. Hey, like, is it better like this or better like this? I'll build both and I can feel for myself. So I'm getting to the end result faster, but not 10 hours faster, because I'm still having to do the intellectual work, the hard work. Arguably, my day with these coding tools is more full of hard work, of hard thought work, than when I could kind of turn my brain off and just be in a coding zone for a while. So like I'm more intellectually exhausted, and it's more work that I'm uniquely capable of. That's one thing. The second thing to answer your question, what's the future look like? Well, I'll give you a good example from like a sales discipline, for example. We had found out that, hey, our salespeople were spending about a third of their time with clients, right? A third of the time is kind of preparing for those client meetings. A third of the time is kind of on the aftermath of a client meeting, figuring out how to, get all the client's demands met. And we built a bunch of tools that just made it a lot easier to prepare for the client meetings. And so it's like a third of their time, we dramatically improved it.
Right.
Now they're spending 2/3 of the time with clients. Well, that means that for the same amount of money that we're spending on their salaries, they're having twice the client impact. Well, you want to hire more. That's, the inclination here. Like if you're having, most people when you're hiring, there's some marginal return curve that you're looking at where it's like, cool, like each incremental salesperson I hire adds a little bit less revenue than the previous person because they have a little bit less of a pool of advertisers to target. And so at some point that marginal return curve flattens out, and it makes no sense to hire another salesperson because if you can double the value that they can create, then you can hire a lot more of them.
If the number of advertisers is infinite, right?
Which for us,
effectively is, right?
Effectively is for
small
us.
businesses.
No, so this is right. So I'm not saying I'm using sales because for us at least it's like a very long curve, and so I think a lot of jobs have the property of, if this person was twice as productive per unit salary,
right? Would you hire more of them, or would you hire fewer of them? We
would mostly hire more of them. In most jobs, then you'd hire more of them because most jobs you're hiring down this marginal return curve. Now, you're right. There are other worlds where it's like, well, we only have X amount of work.
Right, like QA. So QA at Facebook, right? Like if your QA people were twice as fast, Would you hire more or would you hire fewer? It depends on whether QA is a bottleneck on, code.
That's right. It depends if it's a bottleneck. So it's a not. I'm not saying it's a uniform story, but I am saying so I think it'll be non-linear based on what role you're in. But yeah, like software engineers, like we have a lot more software we'd like to write if we thought we could do it.
Right.
It's like we definitely would like to write more software.
Yeah.
We have a lot of ideas we'd love to try, and just like don't have the people to try. As big as we are.
Right.
So I don't think it's a uniform impact. And I think for the experience that each individual has, I think it's very empowering. It's like, yeah, I can do a lot more on my own with less help.
So your theory then would be that Meta would have more engineers in 3 years because of AI, because they all become more efficient.
Well, yeah, but a lot of this depends on the economics of the AI itself too, right? Like how expensive are tokens in a 3-year time frame? One of the reasons I think it's
right, because the cost of the engineer is the cost of the engineer plus the cost of the tokens they use.
That's right. It's the blended cost. So that's the real question is like, we don't know. And I mean, this is a genuine, I actually think one of the reasons it is such a chaotic time in the industry, not just at Meta, but across the kind of every company. And there's a tremendous amount of unease is like, this is the least clear vision we've had of like even the relatively near future in a long time.
Yeah.
Right. This is probably the biggest shift, certainly in my career. And we don't know where it's going to land.
You mean the last 3 months, the last 3 years, the last 2 weeks?
Probably the last 2 years. But like the last year in particular.
Right.
I think 2 years ago, we started to get a sense that 3 years ago, we were excited. 2 years ago, we started to get a sense like, whoa, this is bigger than we thought. I think last year, it got to a point of seriousness that it became an almost existential conversation for a lot of us, like not for the companies, for the economics of the industry, for the individuals in the industry. And it's the most uncertainty we've faced about the long-term prospects of our profession in a long time. I'm one who's inclined to be optimistic about these things. I really embrace them. I think, generally speaking, when we create productivity tools as a society, those productivity tools generate more jobs, more great experiences for people, more opportunities, and not fewer. And I think every individual who's a craftsperson, who's an artist, who cares about what they do, who believes in it, having greater power to deliver the vision that they have in their head is a good thing. And it's going to be beneficial to consumers. It's going to be beneficial to the world. It's going to be beneficial to a lot of things. But the process of going from here to there is going to be incredibly disruptive. And we don't know how it's going to go because we don't know where the economics are going to land. We don't know where the models are going to land. We don't know where the plateaus are. So there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty right now for all of us.
Is it possible there are no plateaus? I mean, the notion that we're going to get from here to there suggests that there's a stable there. Is it possible that it's just ever more confusing?
I'm skeptical of that. I mean, I think most technology fits on an S-curve. And I kind of mentioned this to you before. Even if the frontier intelligence continues to obey scaling laws in the way that Moore's laws did, succumbing to constant and impressive effort and investment by people, I think, to my earlier point, I think we're close to the point where actually the models are intelligent enough to do a lot of useful things. And we're actually, the work that we probably have under-indexed in the industry is making the models easy enough to use to go do those useful things. Right now, you can have to go to the model and like integrate it as opposed to like it coming to you and integrating into your workflows. I think you're seeing more and more focus on that, not just from us with consumers, but Microsoft with Copilot and these types of things.
One theory I remember I heard you expound on a different podcast was the theory that jobs are either under the algorithm or above the algorithm, right? If you're under the algorithm, you're doing things for the algorithm. If you're above it, you're instructing the algorithm.
Yeah.
Isn't what you're saying kind of that like the algorithm is just going to kind of move up, and then more of us are going to be under it?
This wasn't my framing. I think I got this from Venkatesh Rao, or I could be wrong. We'll fix it in the show notes.
However you got it, I heard it from you when you were talking to someone else, either on stage or on a podcast.
Yeah, no, I had read this thing and I thought it was quite compelling at the time. And the person was talking about like Uber and DoorDash as examples. And he's like, look, there's like a class of people who like work for a machine now, which is new and that's interesting. And there's under the algorithm and there's people who are working to program the algorithm. And yeah, like my prediction over time is that the algorithm moves up. And like, I think rather than being resentful for it, there's a good chance we'll be grateful for it. I'll give you kind of a silly example perhaps, but I think one that you might relate to. So I have like, an assistant at work and I'm here in New York and I've got this podcast, I'm doing that. All these things that we're doing, there's a schedule. Now, I'm a grown person. I have a calendar. I am capable, and I could get an Uber. I'm capable. I am certain of going from position A to position B. And I'm sure if I had to, I could also schedule all these things myself. And we could email you and we could coordinate schedules. I could do it all. I don't. I work, like, I always kind of joke in the company, like, I work for I'm like a little race car, my admins, like, take out, like, they got, they got the word from our marketing team, hey, we need Boz in New York for this thing. So they booked me a trip to New York for this thing. I do often feel like I work for an algorithm.
Right.
I really mean that. And it's great. It's not bad at all. I really quite like it. I'm doing the things that I'm uniquely capable of doing. I don't think anyone else could come do this, the things that I'm doing here. Someone else is doing the things that they're uniquely capable of doing. They're better at me at it, and they've got more time to do it than me.
So some of your life works for an algorithm. The most important thing.
I already feel like that.
Yeah.
And it's not just that. I mean, I'll go even further, and I mean this. People who know me know I mean this with tremendous love. Like at home, like, my wife will have a schedule, and like she's got it set, and I'm excited about it. I'm like, yes, I am playing a part in a schedule that I didn't decide. So I think it's less foreign than we like to make it sound.
Yeah.
And the thing that I like about it is it's maximizing each individual for the thing is that they're the most capable of delivering. Like, I don't want to deal with my calendar. I want to do the things that I'm uniquely good at. And so I'm very excited to have the set of people who like operate that for me. And like, they do steer me to places. And then like on the way in, they're like, let me tell you where you are. Let me tell you what you're doing right now. Here's the brief. Like, you read it. I've got 5 minutes to read it before I walk in. I'm up to speed. I'm ready to go. They know what I'm capable of. I know what I'm capable of. This is great. So it's not as foreign, I think, as it sounds for even people at relatively high levels to be kind of working inside of an algorithm.
As I understand it, you had Llama up through Llama 4. It was America's biggest open source model. And I actually understood the business logic of it, which is, we're Meta. We have all the users. We'll build this open source project. Other people will contribute. It'll help us attract people. Everything will get better. And we won't actually really be feeding competitors because we'll just put it into this place where we have users and nobody else can. So it all made sense to me. And then you said, you know what? We're going to switch. We're going to go from open to closed. Tell me about that decision.
Yeah, I don't think the switch from open to closed is a final decision. I do think that we found that we had to take a different approach to build competitive models. So let me lay this out in 3 ways. The first thing was open source models, going through Llama 3, all the models we were competing with were monoliths. There was like one big model, whether it was OpenAI or whether it was Google or whoever else. Everyone was just producing one big model, and that model contained all the intelligence, and they were kind of easy to test one against another. After Llama 3, which I think was quite successful, the industry shifted in a very different direction. You now have these mixture of experts models, you have reasoning models, you have multimodal models. Very often when you ask today ChatGPT a question, it's referring internally to different models that are good at different parts of things. So the idea of producing a single open source model that competed with all of these kind of collections of models stopped making sense.
Why not just make the open source model do that?
Totally. And so we may still do this. But this is the second thing is the process that we have to go through as a company to build competitive models has to be more opinionated. Building the most like, hey, I'm just building a generically intelligent thing isn't actually what most of the major labs are doing. They have a very strong point of view of the types of tasks they want their models to be good at. And they really optimize them for those things. And then they fill in the jaggedness as best they can in areas that are kind of out of distribution.
So if I understand this correctly, you're running Llama 3 and then something happens between Llama 3 and Llama 4. And is it the nature of open source that you weren't able to kind of predict who they were going? That's right about when reasoning happens, right? And like Llama 4 doesn't bet as heavily on reasoning, if I remember correctly. Like, couldn't you have just made different bets as you went from Llama 3 to Llama 4?
I think would have been possible maybe for Llama 4, but I think post Llama 4, it's not as possible anymore. Because it's not as much like, up until then we were making one bet. We were just making the Llama bet. You have to start making lots of bets. You have to start having lots of different versions of models. Now, we do still have a lot of open source models. We still have, the best segmentation model is open source. Like, we are still producing a lot of open source AI that's actually being used by other labs in lots of different places. And I wouldn't say that we're committed to getting away from open source in general. But, building a model like Llama 4, where it's open source, but it's not particularly competitive with what's happening, in the industry, that's not helping anybody, not us, not the rest of the industry. So you have to first and foremost make a valuable model.
Yeah.
And then from there you can make a decision on, okay, what's the version of this that makes sense to be open source?
It's billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of bet, right? And you you guys were fully committed to open source, and then you changed, which means there's a day, a week, a month. When did you realize that you were going to make this transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's all about value. And at some point when you put out Llama 4 and it gets relatively little adoption and, it wasn't really competitive at the time that we put it out even, you're like, cool, that wasn't a valuable bet for anybody. It's all fine and good that we open sourced it. Like, no one's saying bad job. It's just that it wasn't competitive relative to, at that point, Chinese, like DeepSeek and Qwen and these other models that had come out. So there's no point in like going and driving towards an open source model or a closed source model for that matter, if the thing that you're producing isn't competitive. Your first and foremost job has to be create the value.
Right.
From then you have options. Like once you've created the value, you can open source, you can not open source, you can do, there's lots of different ways to distribute that value. And like I said, I wouldn't describe us as like having switched to closed source. I would switch us to having like, hey, let's make sure that our first and foremost, we're creating models that are valuable, that work. And from there we can decide what makes sense to open source or not. I'll also mention that models are very different than conventional open source. This open weights is very different than open source. When you have open source, there's an entire community that forms around it and they can contribute back to it, and it becomes self-sustaining over time and self-reinforcing. Because the way weights are in these models, people can build architecture downstream of them, but they can't really feed back into the model itself. And so every time a new model comes out, like it's a completely fresh, take for the open source community, open weights community. And so I do think there's a story that the models, there's a commodity layer of these models, the open source models that are coming out of China, where it's like, yep, that is a backstop. And everybody who wants to charge a lot for the models that they've built has to beat those models by a lot. And those models are like 6 to 8, maybe 12 months behind at most. That's kind of the state of the art.
Well, okay, so this gets to one of the things that's underlying my question, which is there was this theory that Jan LeCun and others put out, which is that eventually intelligence would kind of be commoditized, right? That the gap between the frontier models and the best open source models would be quite narrow. And if it's quite narrow, then might as well have the open source models.
Right.
Right now, the gap, you say 6 to 12 months. What will the gap be in 3 years?
Yeah, well, we keep, one of the things that's the industry keeps learning about AI is that the frontier has been very consistent in its performance and the scaling laws have held. And as we keep throwing more and more compute at these things, we've kind of gotten over each barrier that we thought would hit it in terms of seeing the intelligence curve flatten out. We've just keep overcoming them. We thought we'd run into this data barrier, and then we're using synthetic data, and it's been quite effective. So we're kind of powering through that. And so the scaling laws are holding, which means the frontier continues to get smarter and smarter over time. Having said that, the intelligence required to do jobs doesn't look like this. Like it has a much more, if not a normal distribution, at the very least a flat distribution over time. And so I think, the smarter and smarter models are closing the gap on super hard things, coding really complex tasks, which is important. But there's a lot of there's a lot of jobs that don't require frontier level intelligence to accomplish.
So your hypothesis for the next couple of years is that the models continue to grow in intelligence at the same rate, but the marginal value of that growth of intelligence is somewhat less because most tasks don't require that intelligence?
We're not quite there yet. I think at some point this will happen, yes. I
haven't heard that theory before.
Yeah, well, I think it's I think a lot of times if I think about most jobs, I don't think I could go do that person's job. And it's not because I'm not smart enough to do it. It's because I don't know, I don't have the judgment, I don't have the experience, I don't have the taste. I think intelligence is a super important factor. And I think the people who are the really almost religious adherents to recursive self-improvement and the AGI takeoff believe that intelligence will just close all gaps. Like intelligence and compute will close all gaps. I think it's super important. The reason I think intelligence, the most important thing that intelligence seems to do is it allows these models to run a long time and not have errors compound over time.
Right.
And long-running tasks, that is important, right? Arguably the more important thing than having raw intelligence is having a long-running task that doesn't have compounding error inside of it.
Right.
And so I really am a huge believer in scaling laws, and I've seen them, kind of continue to defy expectations, and I've seen us continue to overcome those gaps. It's not happening for free. Kind of reminds me of Moore's Law. Moore's Law, the doubling of transistors on silicon every 18 months, was a law that we talked about as if it was the state of nature was that. No, it was an incredible amount of effort successively over generations with huge and billions of dollars invested on things like extreme ultraviolet, nanolithography to cause that to continue. The same thing is happening with scaling laws in AI. It's not for free that it's happening. It's happening with a lot of hard work.
But the amazing thing about Moore's law is that there's never a decreasing return in value to those doublings, right? As the chips double and everything becomes more powerful, it's never that we reached a moment where it didn't matter. Like each doubling seemed to matter as much.
Yeah, and now that we're kind of off of Moore's law as an industry, you really do feel how different that is for us in terms of how we project compute forward. And we're having to be more clever on the other side of the problem, as opposed to the transistor side of the problem.
Well, let's get there. So you mentioned that you hadn't made the right bets at Llama 4, or structurally it was very hard in open source to make the right bets. What are the bets in Muse Spark? Like, where do you think that Muse Spark can beat Claude, can beat ChatGPT, can beat Gemini?
Yeah, it's funny. There's a couple of things. I was at a podcast recording yesterday, and the person who was using it was a huge Meta AI fan. They use the glasses a lot. And I was actually quite impressed. They had zeroed in on 2 of the 3 things I think we're really, really good at. Yeah. One is local. And I think this makes sense because we've been investing in this for a long time, not just at Facebook and Meta, but then also for the glasses, knowing that we were going to have these glasses in context. Meta AI is absolutely the best at local recommendations. If you want to find a coffee shop nearby, it's actually really, really good at it. It's really, really good at commerce, at shopping, helping people make decisions there. Again, makes sense if you think about how we deploy Meta AI inside of the products that we build. That's a pretty important use case for us. It's also really good at health, making kind of helping you understand how to navigate healthcare systems and that kind of thing. And that's just because we had a set of researchers in Meta Superintelligence Labs who were very passionate about that and went overboard in making sure that this was something that the model was capable of. And I think we underestimate the degree to which all the models have these areas of strength and weakness, which reflect the passionate areas of the researchers who build them.
That's funny.
And they're not as uniform as we kind of make them out to be, although they do make up for it.
But what are the strengths in how you train it? Do you think you figured out a better way of doing multimodality? Have you figured out a better way of doing reasoning? Do you have more data because you're able to feed things in from WhatsApp, right? What is it where do you have the edge in how you're building it?
Yeah.
And where do you not have the edge?
So, if you're someone like Anthropic or OpenAI and you have these query streams coming in from enterprise customers especially, that becomes a loop that you're in. And just like any product loop that, we've been talking about products for a long time, a product loop is once I have a product in market, I'm able to learn from that and I'm now getting better faster than somebody who has no product in market.
That's super interesting, right? So you're all consumer, right? You don't have any business customers.
We're very consumer focused. Now, I think we actually, the one exception I'll say is we actually have a great small business set. The small business agent that we have for our advertisers is absolutely best in class. It's another area where I think we're probably not entirely, we're a little under the radar. Mm-hmm. If you're a small business, in America, actually around the world, Meta is lifeblood. The advertising being done on Meta is the only scalable channel that most of these businesses have to reach their customers, certainly much more efficiently than they could through print or through video or TV. And so our ability now to give each of those people a super intelligent AI that's going to help their business grow is great. It's not only is it going to help their businesses, it's going to help our consumers get better ads. Everything about it is a win. So we do have a great loop for small businesses.
Wait, and that is the loop where, we buy lots of ads for The Atlantic on Meta. Right. That is the loop where we input a story, feed into your AI algorithm, you find the audience for that story, then we get subscriptions. And your theory is that is super effective. Super effective.
And I think it's only going to get a lot more so. And for a lot of small businesses, it goes even further. If you're somebody who has inventory, literally sharing to the AI, hey, here's what I'm trying to sell. Can you help me? Can it give you pricing strategies? Can it give you discounting strategies? So it's not just hey, we can run you better ads. We might be able to maximize the full outcomes that you have. So we have a bunch of areas that we're focused on that I think are relatively unique to us. Now, to be fair, consumers is in some ways contentious. There's lots of consumer action out there. But even with the success Anthropic has had over the last year with enterprise customers, you really see the industry moving in that direction to try to pursue those dollars. So it does feel like for us, we continue to be focused on consumers as our primary customer.
Right. So Anthropic and OpenAI have both very much pivoted towards enterprise because that's where the money is. You can't really go there. It's not your brand. It's not your company. It's not your expertise, right? You obviously selling ads is, but you're not going to provide a coding tool for, a big tech company.
Yeah, we're not opposed to it, but it's not the place that we're motivated. Our company is about consumers.
When your engineers write code, do they use Claude Code or do they use Muse Spark Code?
We have a tool called Metacode internally, which is based on an open source platform called OpenCode that we just have adapted internally to use our own models. We use that. We use Codex. We use Claude. We use the whole spectrum. And it really depends on the task, which one is going to be best for each one. I think for not just us, I think a lot of companies right now, you don't want to have in your core workflow a major dependency on a third-party company. Like if a third party
So I hear.
could be flippant and decide you're not allowed to use our tool anymore.
Or the U.S. government could decide you're not allowed to use the tool.
And you were not able to make progress in delivering the value that your customers expect, that would be a very challenging outcome.
Right.
And so for us, like we're very focused on making sure that, but we also want to make sure that we have the best tools available. So each of these coding platforms are actually do have strengths and weaknesses inside the space of coding, things that they're better at and things that they're worse at.
Yeah.
So we have our own platform that we use with our own model, and we're kind of continuing to iterate on that and expand it, especially because we have a lot of code that is out of distribution. There's a lot of, insofar as these coding models are largely trained on open source code. If you are using open source code, they're really, really good at solving your problems. If you're using code, like we've been building code, writing code for 20 years, some of that code has never seen the light of day. So the models have never seen it before. So training our own model on our own code actually gives us advantages on making that code, you make it more effective on that code. So it really varies. And I think as long as you're swapping readily between models, you're in a pretty safe place. I think if you become too dependent on a single model, that's the danger zone.
Right. And then they suddenly have, either they have leverage on you, or you have a risk factor that you didn't have before.
In the worst case, they have pricing power, I think. I was supposed to be right. In the worst case, there's like an actual injunction that they're not able to do things, or they just had to pull the plug. But like pricing power, and it's like economically not sustainable. But I think the flip side is true. The best case actually is if you build your own, you have a greater ability to move than anybody else can provide for you, because this model is trained on your own code and your own systems of working.
2 last questions. What do you think the world gets most wrong about AI right now?
We forget about the hype cycle. Like all technologies follow a very consistent pattern of, tremendous hype, then the valley of discontent, and then a grinding path towards long-term outcome. I find myself sometimes with no friends in AI because I am tremendously positive on where this technology is going to take us as a society in like a 5 or a 10-year time frame. I think it's going to be incredible. I think we're going to be so grateful. I think it's going to be a thing of the size of the internet or mobile phones, or maybe even computing itself, like that level of good. A thing that we can't imagine not having with us and not wanting to use. And it'll make us superpowered in so many ways. And it really will, and it's so cliche, it really will cure diseases. It really will solve real problems for us that we thought were unsolvable, which is so exciting. And also, I think it's going to be a real grind over the next 5 years to get there, with a lot of just disruption and change and strife and misspent money and then well-spent money. It's I think it's going to be, there's a lot of uncertainty right now around it. And so I find myself often with AI enthusiasts cautioning them, and with AI skeptics trying to encourage them. I kind of have no friends in the AI camps.
And if you had an unlimited budget and you could spend it on anything, which you kind of do, but not completely, where would you spend it? That's a question I ask all my guests. We have had a whole range of crazy answers to this question.
Energy. I think it's all downstream of energy. We're turning energy into all these things. We're turning energy into intelligence. We're turning sunlight into intelligence. We turn sand into thinking machines, which is incredible. We're turning energy really into intelligence. I just think energy is the most upstream vector of all these pieces. And I think we did ourselves a tremendous disservice, by over-regulating nuclear that prevented it from being safe and cheap. And if we had been really thoughtful about it, we'd have safe and cheap power. And I'm an avid environmentalist. And I think, ironically, the environmentalists did so much damage to the environment, creating this coal-burning present that we have by cutting off a much more promising technological path. I worry a little bit about the same thing happening to AI, by the way. I worry about us putting it in the nuclear bucket where it's cool, let's kill it before it becomes anything useful, as opposed to letting it become something that's useful and then helps us, cure diseases and these other things.
Is the reason you think that because you've seen legislation in Europe and California, or because of what happened to Anthropic recently, where the government sort of shut off Fable on a Friday afternoon?
No, I mean, I'm really, for me, coming back to the question, it really does come back to nuclear power, where if you have a choice, and this is really the choice that the nuclear commissions were faced with in the 60s, right? It was hey, you can either continue this progress, or you can make this regulation that makes it guaranteed more safe. It always sounds like the right thing to do is to pass the regulation that makes it guaranteed more safe. But at some point, you've actually made the restrictions so great that you kill the economics of the thing itself, and you end up in a world where you're burning coal for 60 years.
Well, this is why AI is going to take off in France, just like nuclear power.
You heard it here first.
All right. Thank you very much, Andrew Bosworth.
Thanks for having me.
That was Andrew Bosworth of Meta. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this channel for more. And if this is your first time watching, please leave us a comment and introduce yourself. Tell us how you've used AI this week or why you haven't. Thanks for watching.